What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and today we're going to be talking about the new build, or I should say now current build at iRacing, because, well, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, this is the most important build iRacing has ever had for a variety of reasons. So, anyways, let's go ahead and jump on in. For one, why is this so important? Well, simply put, because there's competition out there on the marketplace. Coming close, coming soon, coming rapidly. It's either out there with R Factor 2, Settle Corsa, and Project Cars off in the horizon. It's obviously, you know, a lot of us, myself included, and a lot of you guys out there will be playing pretty much any one of those and having a blast, you know. But some people only want to play one sim, and, well, the best one's going to take the cake for them. So it's important that this build upped the ante, and in my opinion, it did. This build is not necessarily the coolest build in terms of features, however, it does add a lot of new things and a lot of important building blocks for down the road. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the most overhyped, over-annoying feature. Oh my god, cones! Yeah, you can finally hit cones and they move out the way. Yeah, I don't know why they hyped that up so much, or why everybody hyped it up so much. It's a very small little change, and it's a very unimportant change. However, in the grand scheme of things, this means that parts can fall off of cars down the road. You can have debris out there that you can actually collide into, and that is the cool part. That is why people are hyped up about cones, because that then becomes a very, very, very impactful thing and very important thing when suddenly you can have, you know, the front nose piece fall off the HPD lane in the middle of the track and take out half the GT field. That way, HPD drivers will have a completely new way to terrorize the GT drivers. Isn't that just amazing? Very small little change. It's very insignificant. It really doesn't mean much for the actual racing, but it does mean a lot down the road. You know, this definitely does pave the way for future needs and expansion, basically. And then, perhaps the most, quote-unquote, sexy feature in this build, new tire model version 5, NTM V5. I haven't logged too much time with the cars before this update, but all I can say is it's not the same at all. It really is not. For example, I've spent a lot of time with the Lotus 49, which is newly released, which I'll talk about a little bit later, either in this video or a standalone separate video, depending on how I feel. But it is very drivable. It behaves like an actual car. It is not what you'd expect. It's tires made of rubber, and they behave like rubber, and it's like drivable. And I've been hearing a lot of people say the Skip Barber car, which is another car that's on the new tire, the street stock Skip Barber car, Lotus 49 are the only 3 cars currently, saying that it's actually very easy to drive, very forgiving, very simple. It'll still show you what you're doing wrong, which is the entire point of the car, but it's not difficult anymore. I mean, previously I would have said that, you know, both here in iRacing as well as in R Factor 2, the Skip Barber cars, they are a bitch to drive. I know it's not my driving style. Well, it is my driving style. My driving style doesn't suit those cars because I'm a little bit too rough, and I'll fully admit that. But just a pain in the butt to drive. Whereas now it actually feels like, you know, with the Lotus, with the Skip Barber car, that they can be driven in a normal manner without paying too much attention to being absolutely on pins and needles the entire time. Obviously, the Lotus is a beast to drive and does require you to be very smooth and careful and calculated, but it actually can be driven sideways if need be. But again, we'll talk about that car a little bit later. It's entirely different. It feels foreign to me. It really does within iRacing. Feels great. Really does. Very excited to see what happens with that on all the cars. Although I will say this. There's a little bit of concern in the forums because they've admitted already that there's an issue with the tire model on those cars not quite getting as much heat into the tires as it properly should be doing. But I will say this, after driving those cars a little bit, I don't think anyone would have noticed had they not said that specifically. I mean, I don't think anyone would have been like, it's taking too long for my tires to heat up, it's broken. But instead, people, of course, on the forums, as they do on the forums, decided to throw a hissy fit. Honestly, it's not that bad. It's not that big of an issue. Like I said, you probably wouldn't have even noticed had they not specifically told you that. You know, it's just an interesting update. But the 3 cars, the Street Stock, the Skip Barber, as well as the Lotus 49, make me say, hold on. Hold on. All 3 of those cars have very low grip tires. You know, the 49 has tires made out of stone, treaded, absolutely terrible pieces of quote-unquote rubber. The Skip Barber car runs on a street tire, more or less. You know, not exactly a full-on racing slick. Street Stock, I believe, uses a slick tire, although it's a very, very hard compound slick tire, not a high grip tire. So you have 3 non-grippy cars currently. Makes me wonder why. You know, I feel like there's something that they're hiding or something that is keeping the selection to what it is, because I just don't see a reason why they would have done those 3 cars in particular. Then again, Skip Barber car, hugely popular. The Lotus 49, obviously, iRacing's latest car, of course, is going to have the latest, greatest updates, as well as the fact that it's the freaking Lotus 49. So they had to knock it out of the park there. And then the Street Stock, you know, the rookie oval car. So I guess it does make some sense, but I would have liked to have seen the new tire on something that I actually drive. That sounds really selfish, but I mean, it's really hard for me to give it a proper judgment versus the previous tire model without having, you know, really good seat time with the previous tire model to make a really good, accurate judgment. But it definitely does feel like a nice improvement, as well as the current tire model, or old tire model, or new tire model version 4 is what we're calling it, although I don't think anyone ever really called it that anyways. But the current new tire model ever, if you guys understand what I'm saying, all the cars that are not the Silver Crown, Sprint car, Street Stock, Lotus 49, or the Skip Barber car, that tire model has been tweaked a little bit to make it a little bit less twitchy, and that is definitely noticeable. I'm just going to say this right now. With this little change, and it is a little change, although it is a very noticeable change, sort of like the last 2 builds have been in this regard. Both of those had, you know, small tire changes that were across the board, every car, but it improved everything. This one, not quite as obvious, not quite as noticeable, but I'd be damned if driving the Radical is not one of the most enjoyable sim racing experiences out there at this moment. That car will basically do everything. It does exactly what you expect it to do. You know, opposite lock, no problem, no fear. Put the power down anyways. You can drive through a slide in iRacing for once. And there's really no fear of, you know, what a lot of people tend to bring up when it comes to, you know, sliding around in iRacing. There's really no fear of that snap the other way tendency that can tend to happen if you don't have really quick hands. Recovering from slides has become a lot more forgiving across the board, in my opinion. You know, again, it's going to vary from car to car because iRacing just has too many cars for the staff that they have and what they're trying to do. So, you know, obviously the cars do vary, but, you know, the Radical is amazing. I'm just going to say it. That is definitely a car you should give a whirl if you have it. The Ford GT, obviously. The Corvette has gotten a lot better in the last 3 builds. It's a blast to drive now. But then there's, you know, still cars like the Formula 1 car, the FW31, which it's still garbage, you know. And this change didn't do that, you know. It didn't change that, but it does improve things. It does bring it a little bit closer to where I'd like to see it. But just improvements, okay? Let's just get that new tire model on all the cars, and then we'll truly see what we have here. And then there's some sounds. We got new exterior sounds for the Sprint car, Silver Crown car, the Lotus 49, which is obviously a new car, but it's using the updated sounds, as well as the Radical SR8, which sounds exactly like the Lotus 49. I know they both use somewhat similar displacement and arrangement engines, but I don't know. I was just kind of shocked by how similar they are. They really do sound exactly the same, which is kind of weird given obviously different exhaust layouts and all that stuff, but not unforgivable. Again, they're very similar engines. Honestly, though, I will say I am quite disappointed with the sounds of the sprint car. Obviously sprint cars can vary from track to track and what engine and what package they're allowed to run, but the sprint cars that I've heard in person did not sound anything like that at all. Just not even close, which kind of disappointing, seeing how several of the other cars with the new sounds do sound absolutely amazing. But the sprint car, welcome improvement, but still not good. I imagine the Silver Crown's probably using the exact same sounds as well. So, not as good as the last build in terms of sounds. And then there's weather, which is kind of sort of here, basically. In hosted sessions, basically private racing, more or less, for you guys out there who aren't with iRacing, aren't familiar with the lingo. It's there, the person can select the weather that they'd like to run. You can select clouds, fog, humidity, wind direction, wind speed, temperature, pretty much anything but rain, and it works. It works very good. For example, I was driving the Corvette around Long Beach in a very cold-ish 65 degrees Fahrenheit is the minimum that they allow you, with tons of fog, and the car was just all over the place, constantly on opposite lock coming out of the corners. Very drivable, though, I will add, even though I was turning the opposite way on corner exit. Of course, putting 600 horsepower down to the streets of Long Beach. A, that's awesome, and B, that's going to be difficult, especially when the track is cold. But the weather does have a big effect. Really great to see that it's somewhat dynamic. It's going to change a little bit over the course of a race in hosted sessions. However, it's currently not in the official iRacing series, which kind of seems like a letdown, but at the same time, I'm kind of thankful for that, because I think it's something that's with the ecosystem that iRacing has in terms of the online racing, and a lot of people care about championship points, and you always want to have a somewhat fair playground, especially seeing how you can control it. You look at R Factor, for example. F1 mods always have league editions, so that way everybody has a fair car, because we can control that. Everybody wants to have a chance. So, it becomes one of those things where with weather, what can you do in terms of making sure that everybody has a fair chance? Because when you think about it, a cloudy track is going to drive different than a sunny track. Completely different. When the clouds come in, the track becomes a lot faster, but the car becomes a lot less stable, a lot more oversteer. But the car is a lot faster because the track does have more grip. It's definitely more grippy, definitely noticeable. But does that guy just do race after race after race, hoping for the perfect conditions for the setup that he's absolutely crafted specifically for that condition? Or does he just not race because it's not cloudy? It's just a bag of monkeys right now. It's just all over the place. Kind of one of those difficult things to sort of get right, and I think it's something that I fully expect at some point during this season, the next 12, 13 weeks here, it will be talked about, because weather is something that needs to be there in the official sessions. I think everybody would agree with that, but at the same time, with the way iRacing is structured, where you have the same track for a week, just changing it per week doesn't really do anything, because then you end up with people building setups for just that track with just that weather condition, and then it's just like regular, only you got a different sky overhead. Or alternatively, it becomes just a giant crapshoot where nobody has a clue, and it's just a mess. Because, even in the real world, they still have forecasts, If I watch them practice, for a racing event, I can flip over to the Weather Channel or go to weather.com here and just pull up the weather forecast for that track and be like, oh, hey, there's a good chance it's going to be cloudy. The car's going to be a little bit more loose, more likely. We need to make sure we got a little bit of a tight car, a little bit of understeer here in the sun, and, extrapolate. But without that, you're just flying blind, and you can't do that. So it's really interesting, because this is a very big change. The fog does look amazing, but it has to be done right, and I'm kind of glad that they didn't rush into it, but at the same time I am kind of disappointed that they didn't rush into it. But it's something that needs to be done the right way in terms of implementing it into the regular, iRacing official series race. But it's not there yet, not quite. But the weather is pretty darn good. It is pretty darn good. Unfortunately, though, it still doesn't change around from like cloudy to sunny. It stays within the same range. Temperature will change a little bit, the wind will shift a little bit, but more or less the same. As well as the fact within the iRacing official series, they've changed the weather from 72 degrees and sunny, I believe it is, to like 72, 75, and partly cloudy, which does make the cars drive differently. It's not a night and day difference. There is a little bit more grip available. But it's not something that you would probably go, oh god, this sim's perfect now because it's partly cloudy, which means that the cars drive brilliantly as opposed to in the sun. Not like that. As well as the fact that with this comes different skies and different lighting and all that good stuff like you would expect. Still not dynamic time of day, still not dynamic skies or anything like that, but my god, is it awesome to drive around in the fog. It really is. Skies change for that properly. They are randomized currently. You can't select your skies. They do have different lighting. For example, you've probably seen a screenshot or two from Montreal where it looks like it's in the sunset. It's similar to Zolder previously here in iRacing, which very nice change. Mix things up. I definitely look forward to the first time I go to Zolder and I can actually see things. And it's not drenched in yellow. Should just go there in the fog, then problem solved. And then from there, there's a bunch of different smaller, lesser importance type of changes. But I do feel like the one standout in that crowd is a somewhat interesting feature that I'm very excited to see how it will play out. The Chief Mechanic function, basically, which allows someone else to make changes to your setups. Now, this isn't something that I'm excited for personally, as in I really want someone else to make setups for me or anything like that, because I already can do that or ask someone for the setup, whatever. But, for someone who doesn't make setups, has no confidence in making setups, this is a great feature because suddenly, you can just ask, could you help me out here? I'm having some issues with my setup. How can I go faster? How can I, go more controlled, basically? I need more understeer in the car. What should I do? Oh, that's what I should do. Okay, I'll remember that for next time, hopefully. But that's a cool feature that I'm really excited to see how that plays out. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the content too much. All I'm going to say is the Lotus 49 is actually a somewhat pleasurable driving experience, especially once you get a decent setup on the car. Check the forums. It is absolutely crucial. If you're having issues, make sure you stiffen the front end of the car because braking is a pain in the butt. It is very difficult to get the car slowed down, but really that's about it. It's very easy to drive, actually. A lot easier to drive than any other Formula 1 cars from that era, within R Factor 2 or Grand Prix Legends. It's kind of the car that you expect it to be, but you don't want to admit that you expect it to be because it's got to be difficult because, it only had the best drivers at the time, and it's still dangerous and all that good stuff, and blah 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 blah. I'm rambling on. I apologize. Montreal, best circuit out there by a mile and a half for any game, any sim. Phenomenal texture work. It just feels awesome to drive on that place. It is so much fun to drive a Radical around there at speed. And then Long Beach, the tech track. We asked for it. We got it. And it is the best street circuits out there by a mile and a half. And it doesn't even have buildings. It is also really cool, I might add, to drive around with the point cloud data. Because, that's one of the things that makes this iRacing unique. And to actually visually see that while you're driving is really kind of cool. So, very impressive update. Lays a lot of groundwork for the future. Very exciting times at iRacing, if you ask me. Very excited to see what will happen with the next build. Because with the groundwork in this one, that one could be very, very, very wicked. So that's that. Enjoy the sounds. Bye.